book lovers. I'm so glad you're here to join me on this month's Again and Again book interview. This month, we are talking with Amanda Cleary-Eastep, the author of the Tree Street Kids series. Just this month, she's had 2 new books in this series released, Lion to the Rescue and Mystery in Crooked Creek Woods. Both are fun adventures with Jack and his friends Ellison and the other kids on the Tree Street. And I love the messages that they are sharing with kids ages 8 to 12. Hope you enjoyed this interview and stay tuned till the end to find out who we're going to talk to next month. There you are. Yay.
I keep watching my bars and getting very nervous.
Oh no. Well, hopefully the mountain air will help us a little bit and help us to be successful. Well, welcome, Amanda. So glad you are here today, and can't wait to hear more about you and this books that you just released. That's so exciting. Why don't you start by telling us just a little bit about yourself and your family?
Okay, well, I have, my husband and I have a blended family of 8 grown kids, and he and I just actually moved from the suburbs of Chicago to the mountains of North Carolina. That's why I'm worried about the
You kind of did the opposite of Jack, didn't you?
Right, yeah. I'm kind of living my character's story of moving. It's a grand adventure because I lived in the suburbs of Chicago and in the countryside for all my life. So this is quite new.
A big change. Very exciting. Now, do you still have any kids at home with you? Or are they all out and about?
No, they're all pretty much out and about, and we're wondering if one of my daughters might follow us, but yeah, so we'll see. We'll see what happens. But otherwise, it's a lot of trips back and forth for all of us.
I
And
bet.
my stepkids are in Kentucky, so
that's not too far.
Yeah, we have a lot of traveling to do, but that's okay. It's worth it. And
that's right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, you just released 2 books in your Tree Street Kids series, if I don't get tongue-tied. I grew up on Peachtree, so I feel very related to these kids on the street, and it's exactly what we did. Rode bikes everywhere.
Yeah, and that was one of my hopes was that kids would, those would resonate because, there's a Tree Street in every, small town and city.
That's true.
And just a real quick story, my husband, when I was trying to figure out a name for the overall series and not just each book, I said to my husband one day, he grew up in New Jersey, and I was like, what was the name of that group of kids you used to hang out with? And he said, yeah, it was the Tree Street Gang. And I was like, that sounds, I'm going to steal that. So it's Tree Street Kids, not gang, but that was kind of a fun little nod to his childhood too.
Definitely. Very fun. Well, what was the inspiration for the latest 2 books in your series?
Okay, yeah, for each book, I really have a lot of little things that are always, spinning around in my head, and somehow they end up coming together. But really what sparked, so this is Lions to the Rescue, that's book 3 in the series. And what really sparked it was something that I was at a writer's conference several years ago, and Kwame Alexander, who is a Newbery Medal winner, he was speaking, and he told a story about his father, who was a publisher, and they were on their way somewhere. The car was full of books. It flipped over, so they had an accident. Everybody was okay, but books were all over the road. And I just had this vision stuck in my head of the whole, of the family just trying to scoop up and save the books. So that little event sparked it. There's not a car accident in the book, but there's something that happens that's kind of cataclysmic for kids with books and vehicles. So yeah, that was part of that. Was a big part of that book.
Yeah. What about the Mystery in Crooked Creek Woods?
Yeah. So that's the 4th book, and this one was really kind of an odd occurrence. But my So I always knew when I pitched the 4 books together, I pitched them all at once. I knew the 4th one was going to be a mystery. I don't know why. I just wanted it to be, I guess. I'm a huge cozy mystery fan, and I just wanted to give that a shot, that genre. But so it was kind of like I knew Ruthie, who's one of the characters, it would involve her in some way and her photography.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Her nighttime photography. So I kind of knew that from the beginning, but it was like, what's the mystery? I also knew I wanted the kids to be back in the forest preserve, which was a big setting for book 2. And so I was on my way to a doctor's appointment in a town I had never been in the suburbs of Chicago. And I was driving along, and on either side of the road were 2 huge, huge cemeteries. And I mean, they were so, they intrigued me so much because there were mausoleums and these huge monuments and all these things. Wow. That when I got home, I Googled it and found out that there was a Potawatomi burial ground in one of the cemeteries.
Oh, wow.
And so that just kind of got the ball rolling. And so that plays heavily into this story. So.
I love how in each of your books, you take very relevant, this book has probably been in the works for several years now, but very relevant topics that kids would run into in their own school adventures and just help them navigate those questions and concerns and what is right, what is wrong, how would I handle this? And I love just what you brought to those characters, that this is set in the 90s, right? But it's still very relevant topics to today. And I love that about this series, that me and my 10-year-old could have a conversation about Indian reservations and about, those sites that need to be protected, and as well as, the differences between Ellis and Jack, and that you address in Lions to the Rescue. And so I think it's just what's going to make these books that stick around for a really long time. And I'm proud of you for that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to keep the topics kind of, I described this to somebody else recently in kind of the sandbox, so to speak. So it's like, the foundation is biblical truth. And then I kind of feel like I've, kind of built this sandbox that is safe for the kids to play in.
Right.
But still challenges that, just the way the Tree Streets, that resonates with so many people, or so many kids across the country and in different situations and environments. I want these to be kind of those universal themes of change and uncertainty, and how does that manifest itself? Well, we all have to, at some point, many of us have moved, or you start a new school, or you're trying to make friends. So, yeah.
Very universal topics for sure. Now, what was which part of each book was the most fun to write?
Yeah, for Lions to the Rescue, there was there's the most epic bookmobile bike ever, and so coming up with the components of what that would look like. So I'll just show you an illustration real quick. So there was the contrast between what does a 10-year-old boy imagine in his brain, as this thing I'm going to invent, and then in real life, what does it end up, with the components that you have at your disposal as a 10-year-old. So this illustration is by Aiden Peterson. He's my illustrator for all 4 books, and so he and I talked about what Jack might imagine. And so this is what he imagines. And, but I won't show you what it ends up looking like. So all the different kids in the group contribute something to the making of this bookmobile. So that was fun. And then for Mystery in Crooked Creek Woods, this was a challenge, but I just had a blast doing it. So there's a story within the story. So Jack and Ellison, who are best friends in this series, they are writing their own mystery, and it's for a young authors contest at school.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's not only, oh, I'm a 10-year-old, first person narrator, I have to get into that brain. I also have to be like, okay, now I'm two 10-year-old boys trying to write a story. And I had a lot of fun with it. So in the book, that story within a story is set in a different font. And
Mm-hmm.
the typesetter did this beautiful job of kind of signaling it with this different font and the little fish.
Golden fish.
Yeah. Yeah. The mystery of the fish-napped goldfish, or the missing goldfish. I forget already.
Yes.
Well,
That was a lot of fun to hop through and see the back and forth and how each mystery helped each other in one
right.
sense.
Yeah. So the story that the boys write is interspersed throughout the main book, and I was trying to get it to parallel. So Jack's character, he's Inspector Jack Ketchum, of the Dewey Ketchum and Howe agency, detective agency. So so kind of how he's thinking as a character, how Jack Ketchum is thinking as a character, and accusing different people in their mystery is kind of what's happening in Jack's thought process in the main book. So
In the real life setting of Jack. Too fun. Well, what do you hope to communicate to kids that read these books?
So for the series overall, I want more so like this awareness of God, and that, so even kids who don't go to church, or maybe don't have a faith tradition, and even kids that do, just to kind of be aware of God in their daily lives, and talking to God, or just being aware of His presence. So that's kind of just an overarching thing I would like them to take away, just a raised awareness of their own faith, and what does that look like for a 10-year-old, realistically. And then each book has a theme that I hope comes through. So it's in Jack versus a Tornado, it's can I trust God in uncertainty? Can I trust my parents in change? Those kind of things.
Yeah.
In the Hunt for Fang book 2, it's stewardship of the earth and care for each other. In Lions to the Rescue, it's the difference between being a best friend and being a good friend. What does that look like? And then in Mystery in Crooked Creek Woods, it's it kind of boils down to loving your enemy.
Yeah. And I have a kiddo that has struggled with bullying, and we've had to just kind of flip the script a little bit and be like, how could we love them well? And how can we treat them with respect, even though they're not giving that? And, it's one of those, that 8 to 12 range is when they really start experiencing just the meanness that kids can come. And so I think that makes that story really powerful, and how that you play that out for Jack and those other Tree Street kids too.
Yeah. Buzz Rublatz is the bully, and he starts out being a little tropey, but I'm having fun with that character, and also giving some insight into, hey, this is a kid that has maybe a lot of anger or fear or whatever. So so he's the bully, but I don't want to make him too flat a character. The other thing I hope the kids take away too is that they laugh. I mean, Midge is a little sister. I think she brings a lot of humor to the book.
Yes.
And then there's the fun facts. So if kids learn something, kind of random and crazy with all the little fun facts that are set in there, like sticky notes, that's great too, because I love to research, and I'm really careful about that being accurate. And
I think that does a great job communicating to all kinds of readers, because there's some readers that are going to just read the words and blow through it, but also just like, oh, hey, I do really like science, or I really do like books. What could I learn more about this? Who's this interesting person that Ellison's talking about? And so I think it provides great little just hiccups to be like, I hadn't thought about that. Ooh, what does that mean? When you encounter a really, I think you talk about certain types of rocks and certain type of animal creatures that an 8-year-old may not know what igneous rock
Mhm.
is, but so it makes it a lot of fun to read for a young mind.
Yeah, and I think for not just homeschoolers, I have a lot of homeschooling families who read the books, but just any curious kids. I mean, I think
Hmm.
the facts, which are you can download off of treestreetkids.com too, um, it might just spark an interest in something or something they want. And just like when I saw that cemetery, like, oh, what's that all about? It
Yeah.
to spark an interest in something and study a little further on your own. But
Yes. I think that's was it? Kids are always curious, and we're kind of trained out of it as we get older.
mhm,
And I think
mhm,
books that allow kids to remain curious and to explore curiosity are always great.
mhm. And that's why I think adults should read kids' books too.
Oh, yeah.
My kids have remained curious, and that's helped me to do the same thing. And you write children's books, so it's like you really can't. I don't think anybody who wants to write children's books, I don't think you can unless you either remain a curious person or
Hmm.
you start to nurture that
Yeah.
before you start writing.
Yeah. If you're going to write for young minds, you have to be willing to dig in the dirt with them sometimes.
Absolutely, or without them.
That's true too. Is that why you moved to the mountains? So that you could dig in the dirt?
Oh yeah, I'm always out in the dirt.
Way fun. Well, Amanda, did you always want to be a children's book author?
Yes, ever since I was a kid.
Oh,
And
wow.
like what I knew was that I wanted to write books that I loved to read. And of course, when I was a kid, I was reading kids' books, but that never left me.
Hmm.
And so, I've thought of writing. I actually am a nonfiction editor at Moody Publishers in Chicago. So that's a whole different, kind of part of my brain in some ways. But uh, but I've never stopped reading children's books. I've always loved
Hmm.
them, and I've read them all my life. And I did publish children's stories and Sunday school curriculum and those kind of things in Ladybug magazine when my kids were little.
Hmm.
And then just kind of got more into professional writing and, that kind of thing. And then decided not too long ago, a few years ago, like, all right, I like literally said, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because time's ticking. Time is
We're always asking that question. We never grow up.
right.
Too fun. Well, what do your kids think about your writing?
They they're super supportive. Yeah, and they all. I mean, my three have been really great about, especially my girls. They just I get a lot of feedback from them. So I'll read to my kids and say, well, what do you think of this? And if they actually laugh, then I'm like, okay, I'm not just cracking myself up. so um, so I get a lot of feedback from them, lots of encouragement. They've all said, I'm really proud of you, Mom. And that's a really great
Mm.
thing to hear from your kids.
Yeah.
My stepson, I have 5 stepkids. Um, my stepson's been super encouraging. He reads, all the books. And my stepdaughter, one of them who just had a baby recently, posted on Facebook, and this just warmed my heart, where she's got a baby girl, and she said, I can't wait um, for my daughter to read books by her Mimi. And I thought
Oh,
that's such a neat thing. So,
that will be a neat legacy to watch happen.
yeah.
Too fun. Now, other than the Bible, what has been the most impactful book for you?
Well, when I was a kid, the 2 books, I read a lot of fantasy when I was a kid, and most people have read these books or talked about them. So it sounds kind of cliche, but A Wrinkle in Time and
Hmm.
Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe were two books that just bowled me over as a kid. I mean, just like, yeah, mesmerized me, really even formed me spiritually. And I still have my original copies of both, both of those books. And then as an adult, oh, yeah, so many books, but To Kill a Mockingbird will always be one of my favorites. And it's one of those legacy, like you mentioned, the legacy. My mother loved it. My daughter loved that book, and I loved it. So that book and pretty much all of A.W. Tozer's books. I'm a big Tozer fan. So anyway,
those are always inspiring. Very neat. Now, when did you first call yourself a writer?
When I think I was about 6. I wrote my first real story, and I remember being, I don't think I said, oh, I'm a writer now. I just remember being very aware that I had written something. I had written a story,
Yeah.
And I never forgot that moment. And then I really started associating it with the books that I was reading as a kid and wanting to do that and starting to do that. So
very cool. I'm glad it started at such a young age, and it's been something that you've nurtured throughout your life.
Well, I also wanted to be a vet and a race car driver at one point. So
I think we all go through those motions. I mean, I wanted to be a vet for a long time, and marine biologist. We, was it the books we read and the movies we watch? They inform our decisions when we're young. Too fun. Now, if you could pick to spend a day with any popular writer, living or dead, who would you pick?
The first person who popped into my mind is Kate DiCamillo.
Oh, yeah.
She has written really pretty much all of her children's books are already classics. As soon as she writes one, it's a classic.
Yes. Hit enter classic. Check.
Exactly. So I haven't read all of her books. I've read a few of them. But again, I was at a writer's conference and heard her speak, and she just seemed like, and I've heard her do other interviews, and she just seems like such a cool human being. And if you follow anybody on Facebook, if you follow any writer, I would follow her Facebook page, because she doesn't interact with anybody. She just has these beautiful little moments that she shares, and they're always inspiring, or some kind of interaction she had with a child that's read her books. And for me as a writer, I just think they're lovely. But when my friend and I were at that conference, we actually got, I think I got a book signed at that conference, and we were just sure that if we asked Kate to go out for lunch with us, she would think we were really cool. But we didn't ask.
It's a hard question to ask.
Kate, would you please go out for lunch with me?
She probably was really hungry or could have used a coffee.
Yeah. I'm like, nobody ever asked me out for lunch.
Too fun. Now, what is your favorite book, Amanda?
Oh,
I know, it's a hard one. But it's one of those, like I say, if it was the end of the world and you could only take one book with you to wherever you were going, what would you pick?
Well, I'd probably take my J.B. Phillips New Testament. Not that I don't love the Old Testament, but if I just had to have one book, just because I love that he actually uses in that translation, which is very British, he uses literary terms like denouement and stuff like that. So I'm like, oh, that's cool. So
can relate the New Testament to a writer. Very neat. Now, when did your writing journey begin? You mentioned when you were 6 was the first time you called yourself a writer, but when did your actual journey begin towards publication, I suppose?
I mean, and by writing, I mean, I've been a professional writer almost all my life. My first job was at 18. I was a summer editor of a small town newspaper. So I've pretty much worked in writing all my life, in either editing or marketing or nonprofit promotion. There's always been, almost all my jobs have had some either direct writing or some aspect of that. But like I said, I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, it was 2017, and I was on the train to my new job as a book editor. And that was when I was like, okay, you know, what are you going to do here? Well, you know,
Mhm.
this is a big life change for you. You're in your 50s. You know what you love. You know what you love to do. You know what you love to read. And at that point too, it really felt like an act of obedience to God. It
Mhm.
just was. It was for me.
Yeah.
Not knowing what was going to happen. I was working on a young adult novel. I had been for on and off for quite a few years. I had a couple of them, and one that I was just really in love with. And I'm like, now you're on the train, you know, you're commuting, use your time wisely.
Yep.
So I committed to, it was 2017, and I recommitted myself to writing for young people.
Hmm.
And I think I got about 50,000 words written on those train rides.
Yep.
Um, but that book is still sitting in draft stage because the middle grade thing just kind of, the door swung open
Right.
for me after all these years of writing and loving children's books, and then it just seemed like that act of obedience had to happen
Hmm.
for me.
Yes.
And God just led me a little bit different direction. I still want to get back to that book, but yeah.
Not quite time for it. God will let you know when. Now, a quick question. As a nonfiction editor, do you struggle with writing? You know, because are you constantly editing, or does
Oh,
writing come a little easier?
oh my gosh. Yeah, I can't. It's really hard. It's a hard switch. It's really hard.
Hmm.
So what I do is I write everything by hand. And I had a whole bunch of these. This, it says
Uh-huh.
Keenan Science Notebook. So these are my kids. I had a whole bunch of my kids' old school
Yep.
notebooks still. I mean, fifth grade. Yeah, that was like, I don't know
I
how
have a
old.
bunch of them too.
Yeah. So I just I handwrite in those,
Hmm.
um, and and then and people have asked me, well, doesn't that take so much longer to handwrite everything, and then you got to type it? But what takes longer is sitting at the computer and staring at it and not writing anything,
Yeah.
and then maybe not pouring out what needs to come out first because I'm already
Right.
editing before I'm doing this, you know.
Hmm.
So that just works for me.
Yeah. There's sometimes I have to, when I'm really stuck on a book idea, I have to write it down. I have to get out a pen and paper and, you know, doodle and write words, because there's something, I guess, more cathartic about writing it than typing it. It's one of those why physical books are ebooks. I mean, there's something very tactile, very intense about writing it on paper. So I
Mm-hmm.
totally can relate with you there. There, sometimes it has to be written by hand.
Right, and sometimes I'll even use they're called Black Warrior pencils, and I get them nice and sharp, and I just love the sound of it.
Yeah.
It's not as practical as writing with a nice, you know, Uniball. I also like those, but it's just, and you have to, even when you're doing that, you have to give yourself permission to be really messy.
Hmm.
And you know, I've got arrows all over and things crossed out, and and then arrows to be continued because I wrote something else on those pages. So,
Yes,
yeah.
to be messy is a great part of the creative process.
Hmm.
Now,
Right.
what is your favorite children's book?
Well, I always say A Wrinkle in Time, just because it's just close to my heart. And that copy I have from childhood, I sent it. I was going through a really hard time in my life. I was in my probably late 30s, and I found out where Madeline L'Engle was working still, or she was out in New
Hmm.
York. And and this was a very precious book to me because I had held on to it all those years. So I wrapped it up carefully and I mailed it to,
Oh,
I hoped, Madeline L'Engle, and asked her to sign it. And I got it back, and she wrote Tesser Well Amanda in it and signed her name. And so
Oh,
it's
wow.
very much a treasured possession. And
Definitely.
so to Tesser, the book's about, kind of a traveling through different
Right.
realities. And so every time I would go into my room to work on these books over the last 2.5 years, because
Hmm.
it was about 2.5 years for the 4 books. Um, my husband would always say Tesser well, and I was like, okay, fine.
Oh, too sweet. How fun.
So it was kind of neat for him to use that as an encouragement. Yeah.
Yeah, so sweet. Now, what are you reading right now, Amanda?
I am reading The Last Bookshop in London.
Okay.
So it's historical fiction. I think
Hmm.
the author is Madeline Martin.
Right.
And I had just promised, I had heard from many people that it was an enjoyable book. And I don't really read a lot of historical fiction. I just knew it was about a bookshop, and it came highly recommended. And I really just wanted. I said once my books launched, which they did on July 5th, that I just wanted a nice little escape read
Yeah.
and an adult, maybe a book, for grown-ups. So,
I know my husband looks at me a lot like, don't you want to read an adult book? I'm like, I don't know, these are pretty good. But every
well,
once in a while.
that's true. I mean, and really, right, children's books should be enjoyable for
Hmm.
adults. I think if the
Yes.
story's really good and engaging, and the humor's there, and the message, and you're not being nobody wants to be preached to, not children and not adults.
Right.
So yeah, there's all kinds of little sayings about if a book's not good enough for uh, a child. I forget what the saying is. Maybe it's good enough for adults then. So, something like that.
Well, it's really do. A children's book has to appeal to both adults and children to be really good. It's like that's the sign of a good, or in a sense, in my opinion, a classic children's book is one that can span no matter what age
Right.
is reading it. It speaks to them. So,
Although, have you ever read a book that you read in childhood, and then when you went back and read it as an adult, it just like that actually happened to me with A Wrinkle in Time. It didn't hit me the same way, which it was it's not the first time reading it, but maybe my mind wasn't as magical. I don't know if that's happened to you or not, but
just like reading the Bible, you come to a book different every time. And so it's got
yeah,
to
true,
hit you where you're at.
true.
Very fun. Well, what can we expect next from you, Amanda?
I'm asking God that too. Like, what's
Good
next, Lord?
person to be asking.
Yeah, I would like there to be at least a couple more Tree Street Kids books. So there's a lot going on up here, and I promised myself I wouldn't start really working on anything or writing anything down till September, which is really hard to do.
That's really
So,
hard.
but yeah, I'm pretty much holding everything loosely. When I surrendered to God the first time, He came through big. So
Hmm.
I'm learning my lesson. And, so yeah, maybe some Tree Street Kids books. Maybe I'll go back to the young adult novel I was working on.
Hmm.
I've got 3 picture books drafted, so those are also sitting, waiting patiently. But so yeah, we'll see.
A lot going on in that brain of yours.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
good
Ask
place
my
for an author to
husband.
be.
Ask my husband. He's like, did you already think of 20 things before you even got out of bed? I'm like 20.
20, that's small. Too fun. Well, before we get to the giveaway and finding out who's won a copy of your books, tell us where people can find out more about you and your books.
Well, the easiest place to go, they're published by Moody Publishers, so
Hmm.
they're on their website. But the easiest place to go is, but not say, is treestreetkids.com, and you'll find but it's a great website that Moody put together. Really colorful, fun, really easy to navigate. So there's a little bit about me, good things about the books. I believe in a week there'll be a sign up for my newsletter there too. And then there's also a link to a YouVersion Bible study for Jack versus the Tornado.
Oh, wow.
There will be new Bible studies for each of them.
Very cool.
Hopefully a new version eventually when I get to that. And but anyway, yeah, treestreetkids.com. And then there's options for just clicking on different places where you might be able to buy the books.
Very neat. Well, I'm so excited about these books, and I know my 10-year-old was already asking for number 5, so
I will tell him I will try my hardest.
All right, well, we are going to see who has won your copy of that, and I have the Wheel of Names. So everybody that let's see if I get my computer to work for me. There it is. Signed in for the giveaway are on this wheel, and I'm going to tap it. It's going to spin.
Oh, that's so fun.
Let's see who won. All right, Cecily Silva. Congratulations.
Books and bookish swag coming your way.
That's right. All kinds of goodies for you and your family, and to enjoy these sweet books with your kiddos. So Amanda, thank you so much for letting me be a part of the giveaway and a part of your celebration of these 2 new books. And so glad you're able to join us here today.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad that God brought us together even before this.
Yes.
For your book and for mine. So it's good to do this work with you.
Amen to that. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining me, book lovers. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Amanda Cleary-Eastep. Be sure to subscribe below to see when we post the next video, as well as write in the comments any authors you want me to reach out to interview here. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Next month in August, we're going to be talking with Miriam Shapura, the author of Up, Up You Go, Joe. I look forward to sharing this book as well as this amazing author with you next month. Happy reading.